Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the deep dive. This week we are looking at, it's a picture of a world that feels like it's been jolted by these huge geopolitical seismic events.
It really has.
And at the same time, we're uncovering secrets from, 7 million years ago? And then grappling with these immediate, almost frightening ethical problems from new technology.
It's a lot. It feels almost overwhelming, the sheer volume and the variance of the information that's hitting the international stage right now.
It absolutely does, and that's why we're here. Our mission today is to try and distill this really complex stack of information and give you, the listener, a shortcut to being truly well-informed.
We're going to try and connect three enormous and, on the surface, seemingly disparate threads. First, this unprecedented military action in Latin America that has, it's challenged the very foundations of the post-World War II international order.
Right.
Second, some revolutionary science that is, and this isn't an exaggeration, literally rewriting human evolutionary history and our understanding of the brain.
And third, the chilling new reality of generative artificial intelligence AI abuse that threatens digital ethics on a global scale.
It's a full plate.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this immediately because we have to start with the dramatic headline that has just shaken global diplomacy to its core. We are jumping straight into the Venezuelan crisis and the geopolitical aftershocks it immediately triggered.
It's stunning news. The capture of a sitting world leader by United States forces in his own capital.
Can you? Yeah.
It's audacious. The operation itself was swift and executed with what sounds like extreme precision. Reports are confirming the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, right in Caracas.
So this wasn't some sort of slow, negotiated exit or a diplomatic coup.
Not at all. The information we have describes a highly coordinated military action. And following that operation, Maduro and Flores were immediately transported to a detention center in New York.
To face charges.
Yes, to face pre-existing drug and terrorism charges following an indictment that was just unsealed by the U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi.
The optics of this. A sitting head of state, snatched from his country, flown to New York to face criminal charges. That immediately puts the United States on a collision course with nearly every major non-Western power and, frankly, several traditional allies.
It does. But let's zoom in on the stated justification for a second, because President Donald Trump's rhetoric after the capture was multi-layered and honestly aggressive to a degree we really haven't seen in decades.
So what was the public message? What was designed to justify such an extraordinary move?
Well, the justification was this calculated blend of law enforcement and, you could say, raw economic strategy.
Okay.
So Trump's official rationale, the one they put out immediately, it centered on blaming Venezuelan drug networks for domestic issues in the U.S.
Right, the narco-terrorist label that we've heard before.
Exactly, labeling Maduro explicitly as a narco-terrorist. And that allows the administration to frame the military action as primarily a transnational law enforcement operation.
Which is a way to try and skirt the constraints of international laws governing acts of war.
Precisely. But the intent seemed to shift very quickly from just policing to actual regime control.
That's the crucial pivot, isn't it? It wasn't just about bringing one man to justice. It was about taking control of an entire nation's resources.
That's what it sounds like. The president declared in very stark terms that the U.S. would run Venezuela and fix oil infrastructure.
He actually said run Venezuela.
Those were the words used. And this wasn't just a political suggestion. It was framed as an economic directive. The administration suggested that American companies are poised to invest billions of dollars immediately to revitalize the crippled Venezuelan oil industry.
So the goal, openly stated, is to secure American access to Venezuela's immense reserves of heavy crude oil.
Yes. And that transforms the entire operation from a counter-narcotics effort into an explicit resource security mission. And, of course, a mechanism for regime change.
That certainly sounds like a massive geopolitical intervention wrapped in the thinnest possible law enforcement blanket. And the audacity, as you said, it didn't stop at Venezuela's borders. The reports highlight that Trump then issued warnings to other major players in the region.
Yes, suggesting they could be next, due to their own alleged ties to drug cartels.
And who was targeted specifically?
The warnings included Cuba, Colombia, and Mexico. Trump specifically criticized Colombian President Gustavo Petro, implying he had deep connections to drug trafficking organizations.
In Mexico.
He suggested that Mexico's government, now under President Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, was essentially controlled by cartels. This rhetoric wasn't just aggressive, it was profoundly destabilizing for the entire region.
It suggests that the U.S. is reserving the right to conduct similar unilateral actions against other sovereign nations if it decides their governments are complicit in crime.
Which you can imagine sends regional tensions, particularly along the U.S. southern border, just through the roof.
The moment this was confirmed, the world's reaction. Well, it was predictable in some quarters, but it was shockingly unanimous in others. We saw an immediate, severe condemnation. Let's start with the institutional response. I saw South Africa led the charge.
They did. South Africa demanded an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council.
Yeah.
The UN,
Right.
their representative, called the U.S. action a grave violation of Venezuelan sovereignty and urged the international community to take action against what it explicitly called an act of aggression.
So for many nations, this single act, the unilateral removal of a head of state, it represents an existential threat to the whole concept of state sovereignty.
Absolutely. The sovereignty established over the last century, and the European reaction was equally firm, which is notable, despite them being allies of the U.S.
What did they have to say?
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez stated very clearly that Spain will not recognize any intervention that contravenes international law.
So essentially refusing to acknowledge any government installed by force.
Exactly. But perhaps the most profound commentary came from the Slovak Prime Minister, Robert Fico. He asserted that the U.S. action highlights nothing less than the deterioration of the post-World War II international order.
That phrase, the deterioration of the post-World War II international order, that is so loaded with meaning. For our listener, can we zoom in on what exactly that order means and what specific rules are being challenged by this action?
Of course. That order is, in essence, the global rule book that was codified after 1945, and it's centered on the UN Charter.
Okay.
Its key tenets are non-interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states, the peaceful resolution of disputes, and most crucially, the prohibition on the use of force.
So Article 2, Section 4 of the UN Charter.
That's the one. It prohibits member states from using force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any other state. By framing the capture of Maduro as a law enforcement operation, while simultaneously declaring the intention to run the country.
And seize its resources.
The U.S. is fundamentally redefining, or you could argue just ignoring, that prohibition. The fear that Fico expressed is that if one global power can act unilaterally like this, the whole system just collapses into might makes right.
That really gives the diplomatic outrage some serious intellectual weight. And of course, Maduro's staunchest allies were furious. Russia, China, the DPRK.
Yes, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. They all demanded his immediate release. Russia and China released these coordinated statements calling the operation a brutal violation of sovereignty.
And for China, this isn't just a philosophical stance, is it?
Not at all. China holds a massive amount of Venezuelan debt, so political stability, and thus the ability to repay those loans is a direct national security interest for them. The DPRK echoed this, supporting nations resisting U.S. influence.
In India, they're typically more cautious.
Even India expressed deep concern and called for peaceful dialogue. India's concern often reflects a broader anxiety in the global south about powerful nations setting precedents for intervention.
In Latin America itself, the reaction must have been incredibly heated. Cuba, a long-standing Venezuelan ally, reacted with alarm.
Oh, absolutely. Cuba issued a grave warning, stating that the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, that's CLEC, that their zone of peace is under direct attack.
And CLEC is a regional bloc dedicated to non-intervention, right?
Exactly. So this is a direct assault on their core principles. Cuba is reportedly preparing for potential further U.S. aggression, calling the action cowardly.
And Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador AMLO, he condemned the aggression. But Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, also had to directly address the U.S. president's threats against her own government.
Yes. AMLO strongly advocated for diplomacy, and Sheinbaum Pardo had to firmly reject Trump's threats, asserting Mexico's sovereignty. The fear in Mexico is that this narco-terrorist framing could be used to justify a deeper U.S. military presence or interference along their border, regardless of the facts on the ground.
Now, we have to balance this with the voice of support, because for some in the region, this was hailed as a moment of liberation.
Absolutely. We have to hear those voices, too. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado hailed the U.S. military strike as the hour of freedom, for Venezuela. She's urging citizens toward democratic governance.
So she sees this as a necessary, if controversial, means to an end.
A way to end the humanitarian crisis and authoritarian rule. And similarly, Argentine President Javier Milei welcomed the intervention. He views Maduro's capture as a critical step to dismantle what he's consistently called a narco-terrorist regime.
Which aligns perfectly with his libertarian and anti-socialist platform.
It does. This clash of viewpoints naturally leads us back to the legal battleground here in the U.S. How are lawmakers reacting to the president's assertion that he didn't need congressional authorization for this massive operation?
I can't imagine they're all on the same page.
Oh, not even close. They're deeply divided, and it reflects this long-standing constitutional debate. Some support the president, arguing that protecting national interests, in this case, stopping narcotics and securing oil, allows for executive action without explicit congressional approval. They're pointing to existing counterterrorism frameworks.
But others must see this as a clear act of war.
They do. They view the scale and scope of the operation, especially the explicit intent to run Venezuela's infrastructure, as clearly qualifying as a war or a significant military undertaking.
Which requires a congressional declaration or at least authorization under the War Powers Resolution.
Correct. Legal experts outside the administration are overwhelmingly skeptical. They're emphasizing that unilateral military regime change, even if you cloak it in law enforcement terms, is a profound challenge to both U.S. domestic law and international norms.
If we look at history, this operation has a clear precedent, but with potentially very different outcomes. I saw a Latin American studies professor, Daniel Shaw, drew a specific parallel.
He did, to the 1990 Operation Just Cause in Panama.
Targeting General Manuel Noriega.
Yes, for very similar drug-related charges. And that comparison is highly relevant. In that case, the U.S. successfully removed Noriega, but was accused of massive collateral damage and violating Panamanian sovereignty.
But Shaw warns that Venezuela is a completely different beast.
It is. It's structurally different and far, far larger than Panama. He explicitly argues that any prolonged U.S. attempt to control Venezuela's vast territory and population would face escalating, sustained resistance.
A resistance, he warns, could devolve into a... what did he call it?
A second Vietnam.
Yeah.
His words. He's warning that the logistical and human costs of an extended occupation would be exponentially higher than they were in 1990.
Let's pivot from the political high ground to the human and logistical realities on the ground in Caracas and across the region. What are the immediate consequences of this upheaval?
The domestic fallout is just immense and deeply troubling. Reports coming out of Caracas describe widespread panic, significant unrest, and near total paralysis in commerce.
So everything just stopped.
Everything stopped. Businesses are closed, essential supplies are running critically low, and residents are lining up in these long queues at the few functioning pharmacies and food distributors.
And there were casualties.
Yes. Venezuelan officials reported at least 40 fatalities, including civilians and soldiers, from the initial airstrikes that were used to secure the capital region. The chaos is immediate, and it's severe.
With Maduro captured, who is holding the reins of power internally, what's their strategy?
Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has stepped in as the interim president. She immediately went on record to condemn the brutal aggression, and she's maintaining this unwavering position that Nicolás Maduro is the sole legitimate president, regardless of his detention in New York.
And she vowed that Venezuela would not become a colony again.
She did. And the information we're getting says she's not isolating herself. She's reportedly engaging in these high-stakes discussions with U.S. officials, but also significantly with Russian diplomats.
So she's likely seeking strategic support and diplomatic intervention against the U.S. maneuver.
That would be the logical play. And the contrast in mood is just so stark when you compare Caracas to the Venezuelan diaspora community in, say, Florida.
Right, in Doral, Florida, often called Little Venezuela.
Exactly. Reports from there describe spontaneous celebrations erupting among the community, people who have long opposed the Maduro regime. There was this overwhelming sense of relief and vindication.
But I'm sure it's not that simple. There must be apprehension, too.
Oh, for sure. Even within those celebrations, there was a palpable sense of apprehension about what comes next. The community is acutely aware that removing Maduro doesn't automatically create a stable democratic state. The transition, if it happens, will be fraught with difficulty and potential violence.
Finally, on this topic, the operation caused this massive disruption that hit ordinary people far beyond the conflict zone, mainly through air travel chaos. How extensive was that logistical fallout?
It was huge. The capture and the security concerns led to an immediate and extensive disruption across the Caribbean and the U.S. travel network.
What are the numbers?
We saw 613 commercial flights canceled across U.S. and Caribbean routes. Critically, 267 of those flights were grounded at just one airport, Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport in Puerto Rico, which is a major regional hub.
And the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, had to step in.
They acted quickly, expanding no-fly zones across the southern Caribbean to ensure air safety during the military operations. This forced major international carriers to reroute or just cancel flights during peak season travel.
And Venezuela closed its border with Brazil.
Temporarily, yes, which added strain to land-based trade and any humanitarian rights. It truly demonstrates how a singular, audacious military action can immediately destabilize an entire regional and economic ecosystem.
It impacts international law, global energy markets, and even just the simple act of taking a holiday flight.
It's a perfect case study in interconnected risk. The geopolitical narrative here is dominated by power, resources, sovereignty, and the reverberations of this event will be felt for years.
Absolutely. Okay, now we are going to pivot completely. We're moving from the volatile present and the collapse of a modern order to deep history and science. From a resource war fueled by heavy crude to the collapse of an ancient civilization fueled by resource depletion, let's head to the ruins of the Maya kingdom in Central America.
This is a really important transition because as we analyze modern collapses, whether they're political or economic, history provides patterns. And archaeologists in Guatemala have recently uncovered what they're calling the smoking gun that sheds new light on the classic Maya societal breakdown, particularly around the early 9th century.
What does the reporting reveal about the specifics of this smoking gun?
It involves finding deeply charred artifacts and sediment samples within key religious and political structures. The research has determined that a significant, widespread fire event was explicitly linked to the dismantling of Maya societal structures.
And crucially, the evidence suggests this wasn't a natural disaster like a wildfire made worse by a drought.
That's the key. It was a deliberate, systemic act of destruction. It points toward intense internal conflict and institutional violence playing a crucial role in their societal breakdown.
So it wasn't just a fire, it was a psychological operation using fire aimed at political destabilization. Can you elaborate on the systemic nature of this violence?
Precisely. The fire was part of a broader, politically motivated pattern that was aimed at undermining kingly or royal authority.
Okay.
An archaeologist, Dr. Jane Doe, interprets the deliberate burning of ritualistic objects, stelae, those the carved stone monuments, and central buildings, as a psychological weapon.
A weapon used by competing, rising factions.
Yes. By destroying these symbols of sacred power in highly visible public displays, they weren't just winning a battle, they were symbolically dismantling the legitimacy of the entrenched power structures in the eyes of the entire populace.
That makes incredible intellectual sense. For the Maya, the king, the Kua Aja, he was often seen as a divine conduit. So to burn his ritualistic items, or the central temple,
A temple that housed the symbols of his divine right.
is to publicly declare that his authority has been broken and replaced.
It aligns perfectly with broader theories about performance and public violence in Mesoamerican cultures, where these rituals and public displays were integral to governance.
But the discovery also confirms that while human conflict was the direct cause, it was made worse by other factors.
Yes, it was exacerbated by resource depletion and severe environmental stressors. The reports remind us that intense drought and climate change during that period amplified the civil discord, making local populations far more vulnerable to political upheaval when resources became scarce.
It's the convergence of internal human conflict and natural vulnerability that ultimately proved catastrophic.
That's the story it tells.
Fascinating. From a major civilization collapsing under the weight of resource stress and internal strife, we're moving across continents to uncover a legendary secret in the Andes that actually turns out to be real. Let's head down to Cusco, Peru.
The reports coming out of Peru detail an extraordinary archaeological breakthrough. The confirmation of the existence and massive scale of the vast underground Inca labyrinth known as the Chincana.
And this was long believed to be just a rumor, right? A local legend.
Exactly, just a legend passed down through generations. But it's real.
How extensive is this structure now that it's been confirmed, and where does it connect?
It is remarkably expensive. The labyrinth spans over a mile in total length. It's interconnected by numerous tunnels, and crucially, it extends directly from the Temple of the Sun, the Cor Concha, in Cusco.
So it's connected to the most important religious and political center of the Inca Empire.
Deeply interwoven with it.
Over a mile of secret tunnels under the very heart of the Inca Empire. I mean, that reveals an incredible level of sophisticated engineering and advanced planning, especially when you consider the mountainous and seismic terrain of the Andes.
Absolutely. And the discovery was only made possible by modern archaeological methods, specifically ground-penetrating radar.
Which can map what's underground without having to dig everything up.
Exactly. It maps subterranean features without disturbing the ground above. And this technology has revealed the Incas' advanced capabilities in construction and civil engineering. The purpose, scholars argue, seems to be a dual one, both utilitarian and spiritual.
Let's delve into that utilitarian aspect first. If it's a mile long, what was its practical function for such an expansive empire? Covert movement of people or goods?
That's the leading theory. Scholars propose these tunnels could have facilitated covert transportation routes. For an empire stretching across vast distances, ensuring the rapid, discreet movement of imperial messengers, the chasquis or high-value goods, or perhaps even military units.
Would have been essential for maintaining control and communication.
It provided an internal, secure highway system directly beneath the capital.
And what about the spiritual significance? Why build a vast underground network if it wasn't purely for transport?
Well, the spiritual significance is profound. In Inca cosmology, the underground world, the Ukupacha, was highly important. So tunnels that link sacred spaces like the Temple of the Sun suggest they were used for specific religious rituals.
So like rites of passage or ceremonies requiring seclusion.
Exactly. Or a connection to the ancestors who they believe resided in the underworld. And archaeologists have already started unearthing cultural artifacts within the tunnels, things like pottery shards and textiles, which confirms they were used as repositories for ceremonial goods or offerings.
It just shifts the labyrinth from a mere rumor to a physical manifestation of their deeply held religious and imperial beliefs.
It really does.
It makes you rethink how much is still left to uncover about these great civilizations. But speaking of uncovering the origins of humanity, we are moving now to our science segment, and we're jumping back millions of years. We are talking about rewriting the entire timeline for human evolution.
Yes, we're focusing on a major breakthrough concerning our earliest ancestors and the single feature that really defines us as hominins: bipedalism, walking on 2 feet.
Right.
There's new groundbreaking research led by an anthropologist named Scott Williams, and it focuses on the ancient hominin Sahelanthropus tudensis found in Chad.
7 million years ago. That is pushing the timeline for habitual upright walking back by a remarkable margin. For years, this particular fossil has been, well, it's been hotly debated. What made previous researchers skeptical of its bipedal status?
The debate really stemmed from the fact that Sahelanthropus has this mix of very primitive ape-like features, a small cranial capacity, large brow ridges, which led some paleoanthropologists to doubt its definitive place as a direct human ancestor.
Or specifically, its ability to walk upright.
Exactly. They argued its posture was more suited for knuckle walking or living in trees, that it was more arboreal than bipedal.
So what does this new study reveal that definitively settles the argument in favor of bipedalism? What were the specific anatomical markers they focused on?
The new findings focus on the anatomy of the femur, the thigh bone, and the ulna, which is a forearm bone. And crucially, they analyze the orientation of the femoral neck, which connects the shaft of the femur to the hip.
Okay, so how is that different in bipeds?
Well, in bipeds like us, that neck is angled to allow the knee to come inward, beneath our center of gravity. It's what prevents us from wobbling dramatically when we walk.
Oh, I see.
The study found that the specific angles in the internal structure of Sahelanthropus's femur are aligned with bipedal movement characteristics that you see exclusively in humans and our ancestors, not in apes.
And there was more, right? Something about the skull.
Yes. The positioning of the foramen magnum, that's the hole at the base of the skull where the spinal cord exits, it suggests the skull was balanced directly on top of a vertical spine.
That level of detail truly changes everything. It means bipedalism, that crucial adaptation that freed our hands for tool use and for carrying things, it emerged much, much earlier than we previously confirmed.
It suggests the process of becoming human was perhaps more of a mosaic, where different traits evolved independently and in different times, rather than a single linear progression.
So our ancestors were adapting to diverse environments.
Right, and this upright walking provided key survival advantages in both arboreal, tree-based environments and open savanna environments. It just makes the study of human evolution an incredibly dynamic field, constantly being challenged by new fossil evidence.
Shifting from the origins of humanity to the mechanics of the modern human brain, we have a fascinating neuroscience discovery about our internal timing system. This is the idea that different brain regions don't all operate on the same clock.
Exactly. Recent neuroscience discoveries detail that, functionally, different brain regions operate on distinct internal clocks. They don't naturally run in perfect synchronization, as you might assume.
So what's the new discovery here?
What's critically interesting is the role of the brain's wiring, the white matter connections, in actively synchronizing these disparate clocks. This is absolutely essential for efficient cognition and complex behavior.
How does the white matter act as this conductor for the temporal orchestra? Can we zoom in on the specific mechanism that allows for this synchronization?
Well, think of white matter as the high-speed fiber optic cables of the brain. These white matter tracks are made up of bundles of myelinated axons. Myelin is a fatty sheath that acts like insulation around the axon.
And that speeds up the signal?
Dramatically.
Yeah.
It increases the speed and efficiency of the electrical signal transmission. This is the physical mechanism that ensures the signals from a fast clock region, say, the sensor or motor cortex needed for reflexes, arrive at the same time as information from a slow clock region, like the prefrontal cortex used for abstract planning.
And that synchronization is key to functioning smoothly in the world. So if my quick reaction brain region is running faster than my slow, deliberate thought region, the white matter has to coordinate that flow. Can you give a concrete example of this balance in action?
Certainly. Imagine you're driving and a deer jumps out in front of your car. Your fast clock circuitry immediately processes the visual input and initiates the motor command to slam on the brakes. That's a fraction of a second reaction.
Okay.
Simultaneously, your slow clock regions are analyzing the broader context. Where is the car behind me? What are the road conditions? What's the best path for an evasive maneuver? Without the white matter ensuring that these different processing speeds integrate coherently and instantly, you might brake too late or overcompensate dangerously.
So it's this ability to balance the split-second reactions with the slower, more deliberate thoughts that makes high-level cognition possible.
That's it, exactly.
That makes the clinical implications pretty significant. If this timing system is off, it must show up in various cognitive impairments.
That's the emerging field of study. Discrepancies in this temporal dynamic system are now being linked to variations in cognitive efficiency and potentially to conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, or specific learning difficulties where time management and quick processing are impacted.
So understanding these internal clocks could open up new pathways for therapies.
For targeted therapeutic and educational advancements, yes. Allowing us to tailor learning methodologies to an individual's internal temporal dynamics, addressing weaknesses in synchronization or lag.
From the cutting-edge science of the mind, let's move to regenerative medicine. We've seen a breakthrough that could fundamentally change geriatric care. Self-healing guts.
This is truly phenomenal work. They're using a sophisticated cancer treatment in a completely new context. Researchers have found a way to significantly aid the self-healing process of aging intestines by using a treatment generally associated with oncology, chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, CAR T-cell therapy.
Right, CAR T-cell therapy is a major leap in cancer treatment. It involves engineering a patient's own immune cells to fight tumors. How on earth is this being applied to intestinal regeneration?
The mechanism targets what are called senescent cells.
The zombie cells.
The zombie cells, exactly. They're called that because they stop dividing and just linger in our tissues, accumulating as we age. And they secrete these pro-inflammatory compounds that cause chronic inflammation, diminished gut function, and poor nutrient absorption.
So researchers engineered T cells to specifically recognize and eliminate these harmful senescent cells.
Yes, they did this in murine models, in mice.
So you're essentially using a cancer therapy to clean up the accumulation of aging harmful cells in the gut. What were the results in the lab?
The results were highly promising for age-related health. By targeting those senescent cells, the researchers achieved significant gut regeneration. They reduced chronic inflammation, and they dramatically enhanced nutrient absorption capabilities.
And the benefits lasted for up to a year.
Up to a year after a single treatment. The therapy also provided substantial protection against radiation damage.
Protection against radiation damage. That suggests huge potential not just for older adults, but also for oncology patients recovering from damage caused by chemotherapy or radiation therapy.
It does. But there are still regulatory hurdles that have to be overcome before this can move into practical human application.
What are the main challenges?
The main challenge lies in scaling up the therapy safely and ensuring the engineered cells remain targeted. CAR T-cell therapy is highly complex, it's very expensive, and it currently carries risks of severe side effects, often something called cytokine release syndrome.
So moving to human trials will require stringent safety protocols.
Extremely stringent, yes, especially when you're talking about using it for non-cancerous conditions.
We're going to transition now to some important public and personal health narratives that really highlight the importance of vigilance and the fragility of recovery.
On the public health front, we have a stark reminder about threats we thought we had contained. Health officials in North Carolina identified a new case of measles.
And this was linked to an ongoing outbreak in South Carolina.
Correct. And the infected individual was reported to be an unvaccinated child from Western North Carolina.
Measles is often dismissed as just a childhood illness, but it's so transmissible and it can be really dangerous. This must be raising significant alarm.
Absolutely. Measles is one of the most contagious viruses known to man. Its R0 value is incredibly high, meaning one infected person can infect many, many others.
And the detection in an unvaccinated child immediately signals an urgent need for vaccinations.
To ensure community vaccination rates remain high enough to maintain herd immunity, which protects those who can't be vaccinated like infants or the immunocompromised. This outbreak really underscores the vulnerability of communities where vaccination rates begin to dip.
Old diseases can quickly resurface as serious public health crises.
They can, and they do.
Yeah.
And we also have some deeply personal stories that remind us of the challenges faced by families dealing with rare conditions.
Yes, former Little Mix star Jessie Nelson shared some heartbreaking news.
She did. Her twin daughters have been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition that may prevent them from ever walking. And this public announcement not only highlights the immense emotional and practical struggles her family is facing, but it also serves as a crucial platform to raise awareness about these rare genetic disorders.
It prompts greater discussion and hopefully more funding for research into these less common but devastating conditions.
Exactly. And a reminder of the need for proactive health screening comes from Daniela Mullen's experience.
She shared her significant distress and vulnerability after having surgery to remove a cancerous mole on her face.
Yes, and her experience serves as this powerful narrative emphasizing the critical importance of early detection and rigorous self-monitoring of changes in moles, especially given the rising incidence of skin cancer globally. Her story stresses the often silent emotional battle that's fought by cancer patients.
From the fragility of the body, let's shift gears to the fragility of digital ethics, because our technology section this week is dominated by a major crisis that is forcing societies to confront the dark side of generative AI.
This is a critical, urgent discussion point right now, and it's all focused on accountability and consent. The reports we're seeing detail the massive Grok scandal.
Grok, the generative AI chatbot developed by Elon Musk's xAI company.
That's the one. And authorities in France and Malaysia, joining India, have now launched formal investigations against it.
And the allegations are among the most serious we've seen in the AI space, generating sexualized deepfakes, particularly targeting women and minors.
Yes. The reports are horrifying. They indicate that the platform was allegedly used to generate manipulated images, often digitally undressing individuals without their knowledge or consent. This has led to widespread outrage and formal legal probes across 3 continents now.
This incident is a real flashpoint for the urgent debate around AI ethics, privacy, and consent in the digital age. It asks, when the technology is capable of creating such realistic, damaging fabrications, where does the legal and moral liability begin and end?
And that's the core debate. Critics are demanding stringent controls on how this technology is developed and deployed. They're arguing developers must bear responsibility for preventing misuse, especially when vulnerable populations are targeted.
It's that tightrope walk that regulators dread, isn't it? You have to balance the potential for profound harm and privacy violation with the concern that overregulation could stifle innovation and creativity.
It is. Many developers argue that once a tool is released, preventing all possible malicious use is technically impossible, which places the onus on the user. However, the international community appears to be rejecting that stance, especially when the tool is so easily exploited for non-consensual imagery.
And what's fascinating here is that at the exact same time, we're seeing AI embraced for incredible productivity gains.
That's the productivity paradox right there. AI note-taking solutions like Plod Note Pro and Plod Desktop are being introduced to streamline professional life.
They offer real-time transcription and summary generation for meetings, allowing professionals to engage more fully in discussions rather than focusing on manual documentation.
And those tools certainly enhance workflow and efficiency. But the moment a device automatically records, transcribes, and summarizes a conversation, whether it's in-person or virtual, it immediately raises profound ethical concerns about privacy and consent.
If the default is automated documentation, who owns that data? And were all parties explicitly informed and consenting to being transcribed, summarized, and potentially having that data used to train future AI models?
It changes the social and professional contract of conversation entirely.
Moving from digital ethics to digital infrastructure, the news this week highlighted a deep and growing concern over European digital sovereignty.
Indeed. A prominent European Union expert lamented that the EU has, in their words, lost control over the cloud and the internet.
Primarily because the continent is so overwhelmingly reliant on massive U.S. companies for essential digital infrastructure, data storage, and processing.
Which poses a major strategic and economic risk. And that push for technological autonomy is made much more urgent by the impending European Union Artificial Intelligence Act, the EU AI Act.
Right. That's set to take effect in late 2025, and it imposes some of the most comprehensive regulatory burdens on AI systems globally.
Exactly. And the expert noted that EU regulators need to actively ease compliance burdens and provide financial support for local European tech startups, because the current reliance on non-EU entities poses systemic risks to data security and economic competitiveness. The goal is true technological autonomy.
Building a more sovereign digital ecosystem capable of competing with, rather than just resisting, American and Chinese dominance.
That's the idea. And speaking of new frontiers, we have significant developments in space that promise to revolutionize global internet access. The concept of very low Earth orbit, or VLEO, satellites.
VLEO. So these operate much closer to Earth than standard low Earth orbit, or LEO, satellites.
Much closer, specifically between 120 and 300 kilometers up. The revolutionary benefits are rooted in simple physics, reduced latency.
Which is crucial for delivering fast, reliable, global internet access. Can you explain the physics behind that reduced latency for our listener? Why does a shorter distance make such a big difference?
Well, latency is just the time delay between sending a data request and receiving the response.
Yeah.
In LEO systems, the distance is still hundreds of kilometers longer. Light, and therefore data, travels extremely fast, but when you cut that distance by half or more in VLEO, the round-trip travel time for the photon is substantially reduced.
So VLEO systems can offer near fiber optic speeds wirelessly.
Which is critical for real-time applications like online gaming, video conferencing, and instantaneous financial transactions. Plus, VLEO satellites can be smaller, more energy efficient, and cheaper to deploy because they require less powerful transmitters.
This promises enhanced connectivity for millions globally, especially in remote areas, overcoming the high infrastructure costs of laying physical fiber.
It does. But the news this week also contrasted that incredible promise with a stark terrestrial hazard: the rising risk of falling space junk hitting airplanes.
Wait, space junk hitting commercial airplanes? How does that become a heightened risk?
Because VLEO satellites orbit so low, they experience more atmospheric drag. This naturally deorbits them faster than high LEO objects. And while this reduces the long-term orbital clutter, it means a higher frequency of re-entry events.
And as the amount of debris grows, the Kessler syndrome scenario, larger pieces can survive the heat of re-entry.
Exactly. And these fragments can potentially strike aircraft, particularly during the vulnerable stages of takeoff or landing, when the aircraft is in the low-altitude corridors most susceptible to debris impact.
Which necessitates far greater international cooperation and sophisticated monitoring for debris.
Among space agencies and aviation regulators, absolutely.
So the quest for faster internet has created a celestial traffic jam that poses a measurable threat to terrestrial travel. That puts a fine point on the interconnectedness of our global systems. Okay, let's move quickly through the remaining global and domestic incidents that demand our attention.
We have several complex conflicts and diplomatic moves to cover.
Let's start with the conflicts in the Middle East. What's the latest in Yemen?
In Yemen, we continue to see these highly complex power shifts within the civil war. Pro-Saudi forces have reportedly regained control of Hadramaut province, which is significant given its size and strategic location.
And this happened amidst ongoing conflict with the UAE-backed Southern Transitional Council separatists, the STC.
Right, so the civil war remains this deeply volatile three-sided fight, pitting the internationally recognized southern government against the Iran-backed Houthi rebels in the north and these powerful local separatist groups.
We also saw coordinated military action in Syria, specifically targeting ISIS remnants.
That's correct. The United Kingdom and France executed coordinated airstrikes on a suspected underground facility near Palmyra, Syria. It was believed to be utilized by the Islamic State, or IS, for weapon storage and coordination.
Which reflects an ongoing commitment by Western powers to disrupt the resurgence of IS operations.
It does. But separately, there was a deadly and very concerning development in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. A Ukrainian drone strike targeted a New Year's Eve celebration in the village of Korli within Russia's Kherson region.
And the casualties were high.
29 reported fatalities among the approximately 100 people gathered. Russian officials have immediately labeled this action a terrorist act and a war crime.
Shifting to high-stakes diplomacy in East Asia, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is on a pivotal visit to Beijing.
This is a highly strategic 4-day visit designed to strengthen ties with China. It takes place amid escalating tensions between China and Japan over issues like Taiwan and regional military posturing.
And Lee's government has reaffirmed South Korea's adherence to the One China policy.
Yes, aiming to position itself as a stabilizing diplomatic force in the region. But North Korea, of course, complicated the picture by launching a ballistic missile towards the Sea of Japan,
Their first such test of 2026.
asserting their military capabilities during this sensitive diplomatic moment, essentially testing the diplomatic waters.
Domestically, here in the U.S., the crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border remains a central concern.
Agents at the border continue to report these deeply troubling trends. A noticeable and sustained increase in illegal crossings, coupled with migrants facing increasingly perilous journeys engineered by smugglers.
And agents are describing the humanitarian aspect of the crisis as really tragic.
They are, and it underscores the urgent need for comprehensive immigration reform that not only addresses border security, but also tackles the root causes of the migration itself.
We also saw a significant federal appeals court ruling affecting Second Amendment rights in California.
That decision struck down a state regulation that banned openly carrying firearms in densely populated counties. The court ruled the ban unconstitutional, asserting that it infringed upon Second Amendment rights,
Which immediately sparked a massive debate.
pitting public safety advocates who fear increased gun violence against Second Amendment proponents who argue for the right to openly carry for self-defense. It just highlights the deeply entrenched judicial and political division over gun control in the U.S.
And back in the UK, a serious manhunt is underway following a high-profile escape.
Yes, Avon and Somerset police are urgently appealing for public assistance following the escape of 2 prisoners. One of them is a convicted murderer, and they absconded from custody on New Year's Day.
And it sounds like this was a planned escape.
The authorities have been actively searching the region, and a 3rd individual has already been charged in connection with the incident, which suggests it was a premeditated and organized plan.
Let's cover a few tragic accident stories that highlight global safety and human courage.
Starting in Switzerland, the devastating fire at the Le Constellation bar in Crans, Montana, it claimed at least 40 lives, including teenagers as young as 14 and 15.
That is just heartbreaking. And the preliminary investigation suggests the fire was likely caused by sparklers used on champagne bottles.
Igniting materials too close to the ceiling. It raises serious questions about fire safety regulations, age verification, and operational standards in entertainment venues globally.
And the bar managers are now facing a criminal investigation.
For allegations including homicide by negligence. And in a moment of immense bravery, but ultimate tragedy, a man named Mark Ratcliffe was hailed as a true selfless hero by his family.
He died trying to save people swept into the sea at Withersea, UK.
He did. His body and 1 other were recovered, with the 3rd person still missing. His story is a poignant reminder of the dangers of unpredictable sea conditions and the powerful impulse of human altruism.
Finally, we have a couple of updates from the world of sports. A major boxing personality is dealing with a profound personal tragedy.
Former world heavyweight boxing champion Anthony Joshua returned to the UK after a tragic car accident in Nigeria claimed the lives of 2 of his close friends, his strength and conditioning coach and his trainer.
He posted a poignant tribute on social media,
honoring their lives and reminding everyone of the fragility of life, even amid athletic success.
And speaking of boxing, the news suggests we have a familiar return to the ring.
You can almost set your clock by this particular announcement. Former heavyweight champion Tyson Fury has announced once again that he is coming out of retirement in 2026.
His latest return to the ring sparking immediate excitement and speculation about potential blockbuster fights.
Particularly against Anthony Joshua or others in the division.
Lastly, a quick international sports update regarding a major cricket tournament.
Bangladesh's interim government has directed its cricket board, the BCB, to formally request that the International Cricket Council, the ICC, move their T20 World Cup matches out of India.
And this is due to safety and political concerns.
Acute safety and political concerns, yes, following the recent exit of a key player and escalating regional political tensions. They've suggested Sri Lanka as a potential alternative venue.
It just highlights how deeply geopolitical and political relations between nations can immediately impact the planning and execution of major international sporting events.
They're never just about the sport.
What an incredible sweep of material. We have successfully traversed 7 million years of human evolution, uncovered the ruins and collapse mechanisms of the great Maya civilization, and then plummeted into the volatile geopolitical reality of the 21st century.
We moved from the earliest bipedal hominin in Chad, who was just learning to walk, to the dramatic capture of a sitting president who is now in a New York courtroom facing charges related to organized crime.
Yeah.
This deep dive truly underscores how critical it is for you, the listener, to absorb knowledge across such disparate perspectives, from the scientific to the political, to navigate today's highly complex and interconnected world.
The military operation in Venezuela, the airstrikes, the capture, the clear assertion by President Trump that the U.S. will run a sovereign nation and demand access to its oil, all based on alleged law enforcement operations. It's created an international firestorm. It's challenging decades of diplomatic precedent.
And coupled with U.S. lawmakers debating whether the president even needs congressional authorization for military actions of this unprecedented scale.
It leads us directly to our final provocative thought.
When a major world power acts with such unilateral force, explicitly challenging the very frameworks of state sovereignty established since the UN Charter was drafted, and demanding economic control over a sovereign state's resources, we have to collectively ask, what does sovereignty truly mean in the 21st century? And who ultimately defines the limits and the enforcement mechanisms of international law when one nation decides those rules no longer apply to them?
Something profound to mull over until our next deep dive.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.